Hey guys, welcome back to Community Groups. It's so good to have you all. I hope you're eating some good food right now. I may or may not be in the room with you, I have no idea. But we just want to give you a short recap of what we talked about during College Street. And so we're going through the book of Romans. Paul wrote this to the Church of Rome because they desperately needed to be unified. And he couldn't think of a better way to be unified as Christians than the gospel. And so we're going to hear the gospel explicitly this semester. And so what we talked about the first night, our first College Street, was this: that we must trust and proclaim that faith in the gospel saves you. You need to be unashamed when the world mocks you for your dependency on it. And so none of us really like to be shamed. I told a story about me being in elementary school at a Pee Wee pep rally, and I just chunk an orange and it hits this lady in the shoulder, and I was shamed by her daughter the next day. And I just talked about how I still think about, I'm 27 years old, that happened 2 decades ago, and I still think about that at night. None of us really like to be shamed. We want to avoid really anything that causes us that feeling. But the thing is that Paul is going to say here in Romans chapter 1 is that the gospel says we need to better understand our shame. As much as we want to avoid it, as much as we want to put our minds at ease, we really need to dive into what that means. And so we talked about 2 crucial things that we really need to understand about the gospel. When we understand these 2 things, it gives us more confidence to share our faith. It gives us a better understanding of how to share our passion with other people, and a more complete view of understanding of people who don't know God, and also how our sin actually really is deeply rooted in our hearts, and it just comes out in surface level stuff. And so we can easily identify maybe certain sins in our life, but we don't really know why we keep doing these things. And so the first thing that we talked about was this: it was to be faithful to the gospel, as it will cause you to be shamed while saving you from it. Paul, he wasn't crafty with his words. He didn't surround himself with only Christians. 2 Corinthians 11 really gives us a good picture of what Paul looked like to be faithful to share the gospel. And so it said he was beaten. He had 30 lashes multiple times. He was stoned, shipwrecked, all because he was just faithful to preach the good news. And so shame will obviously come from the gospel if you're persistent to preach it. What that looks like for us, and an encouraging thing for us, is that we should have no shame when it comes to the gospel. We should not let shame win to affect our calling in this life. We'll probably not face the same amount of persecution that Paul faced for sharing the gospel faithfully. What that looks like in your life will look a little different, but it's all worth the goal of knowing Christ and having others know him as well. And so the second thing we talked about, and the final thing, is we have to identify and flee sin and idols in our lives. So if left unchecked, we'll trick ourselves into hating God and his words. And we see that in verses 18 through 25 in Romans. And so we talked about Paul having tough news for us, tough news but loving news. He's saying that God has made himself known through just creation. And so nobody is without excuse. And so one day we will all come to our Maker, and he's going to say, did you trust me, or did you trust the things of this earth? And so more times than not, humanity will choose creation over the Creator. And so, and that's one of the most dangerous things, is that we're all prone to idols in this life. And so if you don't know what idols is kind of a church word. So if you don't fully understand what that means, it's essentially just trusting in anything or anyone in any particular area of your life over Jesus. And so it's probably the most common ways we sin is we take good gifts that the Lord has given us and we've made them into bigger things in our heart. A lot of times we see things as surface idols in our heart, and we think this is our problem. And so what you may see on the surface is actually something much deeper. For instance, maybe you struggle with sleeping around and getting drunk all the time. You say, I want that out of my life. I have seasons of victory over it, but I keep falling back into it. And most likely, that's not just particular, you have an alcohol issue, you have a sex issue. It's seeking comfort and approval in something else other than God. So you're idolizing comfort and approval. Maybe for some of you, you idolize schoolwork or maybe your relationship. That looks like a very surface level problem, but most likely you're trusting in your control or power over issue rather than trusting Jesus. Idols in our lives will make us think that sin is our identity. And so if we walk far enough in our idols, we begin to think that these things are a natural part of ourselves and we should just embrace them. Well, the gospel tells us something exactly different. The gospel says, no, we run from idols, we flee from idols. We don't trust in the things that our heart wants, but we trust in what Jesus wants for our hearts. And so that, once again, just goes back to our first point of urgency, that people need to know the gospel to realize that sin and idols in their life are not their identity. And so I just want us to be intentional about finding non-believers in your life and sharing the gospel without any shame, because you actually love these people. So I hope this stems really good conversation tonight, and I hope to see you all soon. Thanks, guys.